Hello everybody, my name is Danielle Fopp and I'll be taking you through today's lecture on the legal requirements of an environmental appraisal. So we know that an environmental appraisal is required for the project, and the risks to the project if an environmental appraisal is not completed include social opposition to the environmental impact of the project, and this may lead to people protesting or the actual project itself being shut down due to negative media attention, public inquiries, or legal demands on the environmental standards. And in this topic, we will examine the legal demands on environmental standards. So environmental legal requirements. Well, legislation may require the project or construction development to be reviewed for its potential environmental impact. And on the screen here, we have the process which is required in South Australia as a summary on the reviewal process. So first we need to declare the proposal. So you need to make a declaration of the proposed construction. Then this proposal is referred to the State Planning Commission in South Australia, whereby a detailed assessment of the documents will be released, and these are released for public comment and are available online. Then there will be a response to public comment, so you may get lots of comments, you may get absolutely no criticism or complaints. Then it will go through and they will assess the proposal, whereby a decision by the relevant authority will be made. Now, part of this decision may be the requirement that you do variations to the project, and this is what we're trying to avoid in terms of large variations. So by completing the project appraisal and completing the environmental appraisal, we can try to anticipate what may come up in public comment, and we will also be looking at that in our next topic. And we will also be trying to create those variations early on before the relevant authority dictates to us what variations are required. So the first step is the identification of all legal and regulatory aspects relevant for obtaining the environmental approvals. Now, this requires an analysis of the institutional environment of the country where the approvals will be conducted, and responsibility for approval, for example, may rest with the EPA or with Planning SA. Effectively, each country imposes its own environmental regulations and determines standards to be met by infrastructure projects, and we cover this in the Development Regulations course. We then need to know what the level of detail required is in each of those phases. Some steps might be a brief report, others may be thorough on-site testing and analysis. We need to know what the content of the environmental assessments are, which is needed for approvals, because there is a chance that the content of the assessments may have already been completed in the feasibility study or in the pre-feasibility stage. Are there any sector-specific requirements, for example, those in guidelines or in local policies? And how long do we predict the process will take given the size and sector of the project? All of these factors have the ability to influence the viability of the project and will all link in with your appraisal. So it's not just the physical environment, it's also the legal loopholes and processes that you need to follow, which are important for the appraisal. So let's take a brief look at some of the legal requirements in South Australia. We are just touching on this because, as mentioned, this is covered in depth in Development Regulation. So we have some legislation. We have the Environmental Protection Act, the Planning, Development and Infrastructure Act, Mining Act, Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act is a Commonwealth Act, but it still applies to South Australia. So for example, if we were going to look at site contamination as part of a project, well, under the Environmental Protection Act 1993, known or suspected groundwater contamination must be reported to the EPA. The authority can then require assessment and, if necessary, remediation, which means to treat, contain, remove, or manage the contamination. Now, under the Planning, Development and Infrastructure Act, the planning system includes a standardised legislative framework to assess and manage risks posed by known or potential site contamination to enable the safe development and use of land. Investigating and cleaning up contaminated sites can be expensive, and this will form part of your project appraisal if the project site has site contamination. Prospective land purchasers should be aware of the risks of potential contamination and carry out careful, thorough pre-purchase inquiries known as the due diligence process, which we discuss in our contract administration courses. So, following a review of the legal requirements for the project, we are going to safely conclude for this theoretical project that there are no known specific aspects of the project that make environmental approvals impossible. Following a review of the legal requirements for the project, there are no known specific aspects of the project that make the cost to obtain approvals prohibitive. So these are 2 ticks. Following a review of the legal requirements for the project, it does not appear that large variations to the project will be required to obtain approvals. Is the expenditure worthwhile? Well, more investigations are required, but at least from a legal standpoint, we can conclude and provide our recommendation for the client.